I am Kelly Rada from GIE Media's Horticulture Group, and I welcome you to today's live event, Biochar and Better Soil, a smarter way to build healthier landscapes and stronger margins, brought to you by Wakefield in partnership with Garden Center Magazine. And before we get started, I have a few, excuse me, housekeeping things to cover. So, as in most Zoom meetings and presentations, everybody in the audience will be muted, and I encourage everyone to scroll down to the bottom of your screen and use the Q&A box when you have a question as they come up during the presentation. If you mess up and put it in the chat, that's fine, but if you can put that in the Q&A box, that would be outstanding. And we will be taking some questions, I believe, throughout the presentation, and then there will be time at the end to take additional questions. Excuse me. And this presentation will be recorded and sent to you in an email several days after the end of today's presentation, just in case you get a phone call and you need to jump out and help one of your employees or something. Don't worry, you won't miss it. You will get a recording, or you can also share it with your team who wasn't able to be here today, but wanted to give a little explanation for why we're here today. So soil health is becoming a competitive advantage for garden retailers and landscape professionals, and biochar is an effective tool for improving soil structure, water retention, nutrient efficiency, and long-term plant performance. Our guest today will explain what biochar actually does in the soil and how it fits into real-world landscaping and lawn care applications. I would like for our presenters, Tom and Tony, to please give a quick introduction, and then you are more than welcome to start the presentation. Thanks for being here today.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Tony, I'll go first. Tony and I are twin brothers, so people who don't know us, we started Wakefield a little over 10 years ago. But my name's Tom Marrero. I'm the president and CEO of Wakefield BioChar. We're super excited to have you all with us here today. As far as my background and how it's related to biochar, I received a PhD in analytical chemistry from the University of Missouri way back in the 90s. And during that time, we used biochar for our research. And the fun fact is that my group that I worked with actually used the term biochar for the first time in a peer-reviewed scientific paper. So in some ways, I'm right there at the beginning of the word biochar.
All right, and I am Tony Marrero, and I am also the co-founder and chief marketing officer for Wakefield. For me, my experience has been in business development, marketing and brand positioning, product marketing, and taking what I think is an exciting new solution to a problem and trying to build a business around it. And that's exactly what happened a little over 10 years ago with Wakefield, where I learned about it, biochar, about that time, and was very excited about what it could do, and then put together Wakefield just to see what could happen. And we've been very proud to watch Wakefield grow, and excited to present this information to you today.
So before Tony gets into the next slides, I wanted to also introduce, we have a couple of people here on with us from Wakefield. One is Steve Smith. He's our VP for retail. And so Steve may be jumping in every once in a while to add some needed information and help you out with some questions. So we're really thankful to have Steve Smith on with us. And the other thing is we are anxious to hear your questions, and we hope that you do have some for us, because we want to make sure that we inform you with the things that you need to be really clear on what biochar is and how it can be very impactful for your soil and also your business.
Okay, so before we get into the technical things, I get to share just really what I think is the meat of this. And I know we have a lot of independent lawn and garden store owners and buyers, as well as landscape businesses. Let's talk about the business side of this, and what makes this presentation important is that if you look at big picture, the broader soil amendment market is growing at about 11% compound annual growth rate, the CAGR. And that's, we believe, driven by soil health, the water efficiency, and sustainability trends in the market. But what we think is more interesting is the biochar category itself. It's growing at roughly 19% CAGR, which is nearly twice the pace of the overall category. That tells us that biochar isn't just riding a wave. It's actually outperforming, and we think it's because it delivers these measurable results and long-term value that customers are actively seeking. So the category growth is already translating into like real dollars. In just 1 year, we look at the U.S. biochar product sales have more than doubled, and it went from 22 million to nearly 54 million from 24 to 25. So this includes both the online and brick and mortar channels. So we recognize it's also not just this niche e-commerce story. It's got mainstream retail momentum. And in short, really, the adoption is accelerating because customers are buying and rebuying and seeing results. So what's driving the growth? Biochar checks what we think checks three boxes that today's gardeners and landscapers care deeply about. First of all, it's an organic soil improvement and it works with existing practices. Secondly, it delivers measurable performance gains. It's got that, we're going to talk about this, better water retention and nutrient efficiency and root health. And third, it is a carbon negative solution. And that aligns performance with sustainability. That's a combination that is really powerful in today's markets, and it's why this category we believe is expanding so quickly.
So we broke it down into a few sections. I want to talk to you about biochar, really what it is, and then we want to talk to you about how you would use it, so you're educated on the different ways we can apply it in a lawn and garden scenario, and then also how you can sell it. We want to make sure you have those sorts of tools as we go forward. So by the time you leave, you have a good amount of information that you feel comfortable with what biochar is and how you can actually make it work into your purposes. So the first thing to talk about is really biochar and how long it's been around. I think a lot of people may think the word is new to them. I told you in the 90s is when we used it for the first time. The reality is the material that we call biochar today has been around for thousands of years. It really has. It's not novel, and it's actually been proven for generations. So a couple thousand years ago, there's great stories of along the Amazon River basin, there were large populations of indigenous people that found that as they were doing burnings of agricultural residues and things that they could find in the forest, either to cook food or to do other things that they needed to do, they found that the soils around that, when they were to plant, the corn would be better. There would be more ears of corn. It would be healthier. It would be able to supply and give food and nutrition to the people along there. And so that was sort of an indication that when you add carbon, when you add this biochar to the soil, it actually does improve soil health, but it's a big food security issue. Unfortunately, the story goes that there were explorers that came into the area. They brought a lot of diseases, and actually the people died. But unfortunately for that, but the soil still maintained its healthy soil for generations after that, for decades after that. To this day, it's still it's more common, let's say, in Eastern Europe and other parts of the world where people use biochar in their gardening. For the United States, there was biochar being used probably more before World War II. After World War II, where there was these large-scale manufacturing capabilities for chemicals to support the war efforts, post-World War II, those facilities and those companies found ways to generate large quantities of chemical fertilizers. And those have been used in abundance by our agricultural world to this day. What we're trying to do is bring biochar back into soil health, into agriculture, and into specifically for you all for lawn and garden and landscaping purposes. So there is an importance to bring it back because it has huge benefits for that. So what is biochar? Biochar is very simply taking a plant and converting it to a carbon. When we talk about biochar, it's carbon-rich material made from a biomass, and that can be from trees, it can be from plant ag waste, it can be from any sort of residual that we're able to take and convert into this carbon, which you see in the background of the image there, using something called pyrolysis, which is just a technical word used to mean that we heated it, but without oxygen. So this is not your backyard campfire. Backyard campfires, it's combustion. It's using the oxygen in the environment to burn the wood, and that's how we generate our heat. Pyrolysis, we're removing the oxygen So we're not getting the same reactions. We're actually securing that carbon in a way that's useful for the soil. With that, and we talked about that in the previous slide, it lasts for a long time. Biochar does not decompose, not for hundreds of thousands of years. And that's giving it a lot of purpose and reasons for things that people want to use. And we've seen for soil health. So every season, when you walk down through it, in the spring, it's wonderful for plantings for your soil. In the summer, it's great to help deal with the resistance of drought and other things that might impact the soils during the heat of the summer. In the falls, it's wonderful for fall plantings and in preparation for the winter. And I know for a lot of us that are in the colder climates right now, you've got snow, you've got ice, you're laying down salts on sidewalks and roads. If you lay down biochar on your grass on the edge of your sidewalks or around your shrubs that may line your sidewalks or driveways in the fall, late fall, it will actually help protect those salts from damaging the roots in the spring when the snow melts and the ice melts and the ground starts to thaw. So it has a purpose even in the winter. So with that, what is biochar not? And so biochar is not a fertilizer. It is not a mulch. It is not a compost. It's a different product, but it does help all of them. So fertilizers are high nutritional, NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. They have a purpose and a need for plants for food. Biochar will help support that in how it interacts with the fertilizers. I tend to equate it to like a high efficiency laundry detergents. When you started to develop those detergents, they became more powerful. When you put biochar in with a fertilizer, it's going to hold the fertilizer together better, and it's going to keep it in the soil better, and you're going to get a lot of benefits from it. When you work with a mulch and compost, they will degrade over time. The biochar will not, but it certainly is a good addition to it. The last thing I say, what is biochar not? And I think a lot of people like to ask the question about, well, I can just make it in my backyard. Biochar is not a charcoal. I know we use the word a lot with biochar. People will equate it with like agricultural charcoal. I think it's a nice word. People understand what it means. It's a word that gives people understanding that it's a carbon. But charcoal itself, its primary purpose is for a fuel. It's to heat or create some sort of energy. Charcoal has a lot of oils in it, and that helps increase its energy density. If biochar is made correctly, it doesn't have those oils, and those oils could be toxic, phytotoxic, or toxic for your plants. And so we don't want that in your soil. I tell people like I can take a cotton shirt and use it as fuel, right? Anything with carbon, we can make it and we can burn it. Biochar, although it is a carbon, it is not technically, the purpose is not to be a fuel. So with that, we're talking about carbon. There's all kinds of ways to describe carbon, but in total carbon means all the carbon that might be in something. So biochar is specifically more of an organic carbon, but an inorganic carbon, to describe that, think about lime. It's carbonates, things that are considered non-organic. And so we're not using biochar as an inorganic carbon source for your soil. That would be like a lime or a liming agent. Organic carbons are derived from like a plant that has been converted into a carbon, making it a fixed carbon. And that's really what we're focusing in on with biochar. So where can biochar really impact your soil? It's going to improve the soil structure. So the porosity of biochar is great. It's about 300 to 350 meters squared per gram. That's a lot of surface area. When you have that kind of surface area and that porosity, you can do a lot of things. So with a clay soil, it actually helps break up the clay, creating permeability of water. So it makes the clay soil a little bit less of a prevention of water getting into the soil itself. With sandy soils, it's kind of the opposite. Biochar itself can hold 4 to 5 times its weight in water because of those pore structures. And so with sandy soils, you're actually able to hold water in the soils better. And then when we talk about nutrients, the surface of biochar, because of how it's made, it has a slight negative charge, and it holds in nutrients in the soil, which allows it to be there for roots. And that's an important part of the root zone interactions and what's going on in that soil microbe zone. So what we want to do is try to find ways to differentiate and how we can improve your soils. And biochar's interaction with beneficial microbes is incredible. And we've seen through a lot of tests that even mycorrhizal fungi will increase in biochar amended soils. So you're getting more living beneficial microbial activity, mycorrhizal growth, holding nutrients in the soil, creating stronger roots, which help you get better plants. So when we talk about, now we're going to talk about with common uses in landscaping and garden plants. Turf grass is a great one to talk about. With grass itself, where does biochar come into play? It does generally have a slightly higher pH, so it can help to bring up pH of soils just a little bit, but we do not consider it a true liming agent. One thing it can do with soils, especially with turf grass, is doing broadcast spreading if the grass is already established, or tilling it in prior to, let's say, an application of sod, is it helps create a zone for the roots to grow. And during hot summers or repetitive mowings where the roots are getting stressed, the char is there to help make sure there's nutrients for it. Trees and shrubs, again, it's all about the root ball. When you're putting and installing in trees and shrubs, getting biochar and a compost around it is really important, because remember, biochar is not a nutritional source. It's a structure that's very helpful for the soil. Having that compost there or some nutrition will help make sure those roots are getting fed, but the biochar will make sure that they also grow and get stronger for that plant to grow. Flowers are wonderful, and what they really do like is that high nutritional access. And so having, again, a biochar amended soil makes sure that those nutrients are there. With fertilizers themselves, you can lose about 70% of your fertilizer to groundwater, and that's not good. It goes down into away from the plants. That's not where it's supposed to be. And so we want to keep those nutrients for your flowers. And raised bed gardens, it's honestly, I always want to talk about tomatoes. When you talk about a raised bed garden, it's wonderful to have biochar. Tomatoes really do seem to do very well with it. All the other plants, vegetables and fruits will also do well with biochar, and it helps with aeration. It helps with, again, holding those nutrients there for your raised beds to grow. So we're really excited about all the applications for biochar.
So Tom, we have a question that came in that I think is relevant to this. The first question is, if biochar is carbon, does biochar neutralize pesticides or fertilizers that I add to my soil?
So it's not going to neutralize the fertilizers. If anything, it's going to hold them in there. And I think one of the words people like to talk about with biochar is charging it. By allowing the biochar to be in the soil, the fertilizer will charge up the biochar and hold those nutrients will be there, but they're not locked away forever. The fertilizers will then dissipate back into or transition back into the soils and maintain that nutritional source for it. For pesticides, there is some evidence of, if you were to have biochar in your soil, that the pesticides may have a slightly diminished effectiveness for what they're doing, because it is holding them for that immediate use of the pesticide. It doesn't mean the pesticides are going away, just means that it's not all there for doing what they need to do with the pests. So for fertilizers, it really is a strong thing to have.
And one more sort of related question is, with the clay soil, does biochar break up the clay?
So it will, when you're putting it in the soil, putting it in the clay, it does slowly break up the clay, depending on how you integrate it into the clay soils. But the fact that it is so porous and it does mitigate itself down through the clay over time, it will slowly break it up. But you would want to try to find ways to get it integrated in there a little bit to begin with. Okay, so let's talk about sustainability and environmental benefits. And thank you for the questions, by the way. The biochar itself it's a carbon dioxide removal material. And so when we look at that, I always think about trees. So trees are doing photosynthesis, they're taking in CO2, they're locking it into their system, and they're doing great things. So what happens when a tree falls in the forest? Well, people say, can you hear it or not? It doesn't matter. What happens is it's going to decompose over time. If you allow that tree to decompose, then you're allowing all that carbon that it's brought in through the CO2 to go into the atmosphere. So you're allowing greenhouse gases to escape. It's not really what that part is doing. So it's locking in the carbon. We're now going to convert it into a fixed carbon through pyrolysis and preventing that greenhouse gas from ever escaping into the atmosphere. So this is where there's quite a few regulatory bodies that have acknowledged biochar as being one of the key ways to reduce global warming by being a carbon negative material. That means it's holding in more carbon than was released, that could have been released into the atmosphere. We talked about fertilizer runoff. With the fertilizer runoff, and as far as the environmental benefits, keeping it out of the groundwater prevents it from going into tributaries and streams, which goes to rivers, which goes to like the Gulf. And if you can do that, then you can really make sure you're preventing things like algae blooms, which cause dead zones in the Gulf. It's also keeping our rivers and streams cleaner. And it's just helpful. Again, you're putting more of your dollars you spend on that fertilizer into the soil. Using less water is important, especially in arid or arid climates where you really do value your water and how you're going to work with it. And then this is a sustainable material, and people who are looking at sustainable products for things like LEED certification, this is something that is definitely something to look at. This is my favorite slide. So if you go away with anything, kind of remember this slide. So biochar, one of the great things about biochar, again, is the porosity. Having all those pores in it, they're of different sizes, but what's great is that beneficial microbes do flourish in it. There's nutrition from that's absorbing through its charging with interactions with the soil. They proliferate, and that's helpful for your soil. What's also important to know is that pathogenic microbes, the ones that might be harmful for your soil, really is they're bigger in general, and so they don't like the pores. They can't get into as much as protecting our microbes. So it's a good thing. It's actually something that I like to really know. This is a discriminator maybe from other soil amendments, is that the microbial growth is really important.
Okay, so it's back to me, and I'm going to start with this fun fact and really kind of build on what Tom was just describing as the surface area and the porosity of biochar. Fun fact: a tablespoon of biochar has enough surface area to cover a tennis court. So if you were to get that tablespoon, you flatten out all the biochar to all its surface area, in just a tablespoon, you're covering that entire tennis court. And I think that goes really strongly to biochar's ability and unique structure to make a difference in your lawn, shrubs, trees, and gardens. All right, so what I'd like to talk more about now is the like how it's used, and we're going to look at landscapers. We know we have some landscapers on this call, and again, it's about that biochar-enriched topsoil, getting an improved root zone, and water retention, and how do you use it for your projects. I want to take a quick note about how you use it. Also, is there's a function of, well, how is it delivered? And there are bulk super sacks. You can get the biochar in 2 cubic yard super sacks, as well as the smaller packaging that is really part of that lawn and garden retail business. That's the cubic foot bag, or 4 quart or 2 quart. So there are options in how you receive biochar to make that application a little more functional. So what we're doing and why we're doing this for these bigger projects or for your gardens is looking at what is biochar contributing, and not just the water and nutrients. It's going to help the plant in reducing transplant shock. When you allow for all the right nutrients and all the right amount of water, and that soil media to be ready, you're going to reduce the stress on the plant. And that's an important note. By also including biochar, you're going to improve that early root development. And that's going to improve the establishment of the plants that you're putting in the ground. And again, with the plant available water and nutrients that are not just going to flow through a sandy soil or get lost in runoff, you're going to improve the early results and then the long-term results using biochar because of the structure and the nature of that material. So more resilient lawns, more resilient plants. So how much biochar do you add? And that's a great question. So there's a kind of a rule of thumb. If you don't know any better, 5 to 10% by volume, and that plantable soil depth is really a good application rate. And so you're going to either mix or till it in soil, or with top dressing, you might apply it with a spreader, and then hopefully it's after a core aeration. With new lawns, we're going to look at biochar, with the top 3 inches, and you're going to rake it or top dress it, depending on how it's applied. If you were going to use the smaller bags, that 1 cubic foot bag, especially as a homeowner comes into a store, it's about 1 cubic foot per 300 square feet is a really good application rate for lawns. Trees and shrubs, again, it's that 5 to 10% by volume, but we're going to focus that biochar application around the root ball or closer to the plant root. In that drip line of the tree is ideal as well. If you're going to be able to put that in, and maybe you're going to aerate around the tree. Raised beds, this is the easiest math of it all. It just so happens a common raised bed size is 8 foot by 4 foot. And it just so happens that 1 cubic foot bag is perfect for that 8 foot by 4 foot garden. So that would be your easy message when you're looking at application rate is a cubic foot for an 8 foot by 4 foot raised bed garden would be a perfect application. Now, if you're doing with renovations or you've got an area where the topsoil actually was removed, and that happens in a lot of new developments, adding that 10% biochar to the remaining soil will improve water flow. It'll help that soil allow for the the nutrients and the water to get to the grass seed or plants that you've got by adding biochar to that soil. So business benefits for landscapers specifically, this is where it really makes a difference. Not only do you have these, I guess I'll say, better looking bushes and flowers and trees, you're going to get fewer complaints. You're going to have fewer callbacks because of the ability for biochar to support that early growth as well as the long-term stability and resistance of drought and disease. Biochar helps you with fewer complaints and callbacks. You're going to have a conversation about premium soil upgrades. You're going to allow for your customers to select something that is a more sustainable product as a premium upgrade. And that becomes a really strong differentiator when you're looking at bids, when you're talking to someone about what can you do to give them a better experience, whether it be their garden, lawn, or landscaping. So when you're talking to clients about biochar, just you again think about there's the long-term soil benefits. What you're putting as a landscaper in that soil with biochar is going to be there when the crew leaves the site and will continue to be a benefit for years to come. Sustainability, in addition to the overall performance, is a great way to also share your interest in making not only a better garden or a better landscape, but a better world. We're all in this community together, and biochar is a sustainability application as much as anything. All right, so in the stores, you're walking through the lawn and garden section, and you look at the shelf. How does biochar work into existing categories? Well, biochar, it can be a standalone product, and we have premium biochar, which is just biochar by itself. We also have something called Carbon Boost, and Carbon Boost is that inoculant to charge the biochar with mycorrhiza, humic acid, microbes are added to it. Our Carbon Boost is a proprietary inoculant for biochar that really gets it going right from the start. So we can give you the opportunity to do your own thing with biochar and charging it your way, or add Carbon Boost that way. That's the standalone option for biochar. That's a great add-on or cross-sell if someone is also looking at other brands in your aisle and they want to get a different soil amendment. Share that 4-quart bag of biochar as a way to make whatever else they're buying even better. Now, let's say they're not sure what biochar is and they still are interested in gardening or their tomatoes. Seeing the label that we have here and the packaging has this amazing opportunity to show, hey, this is a premium product. This is your garden blend boosted with biochar, charged with Carbon Boost, ready to go. And that creates a new opportunity. And on the back of the bag, we have quite a bit of information to explain all the benefits. And then you have the more niche cactus and succulents or indoor plants. These are ready to use mixes. They're catering to that unique use of the soil for wherever the plants may be. Cactus and succulents we found to be incredibly popular, and we're excited about that. Indoor plants, obviously, a big part of everyone's home or apartment. So this slide gets to something really important. It's basically biochar isn't just participating in category growth. It's literally driving it. We're seeing premium positioning work because biochar is easy to understand when it's explained well, and it delivers benefits customers can actually see. So our strong branding and our packaging, we hope, reduces a lot of confusion on the shelf, and it helps the staff explain, the product quickly and confidently. We know that you may not have staff in the aisle all the time, so the packaging of Wakefield's products will have that conversation with your customer, but ideally your staff also get to have that conversation. So ultimately the data does back up what I'm explaining to you. Uh, for example, in 2025, Wakefield outperformed the category by 24%. That tells us that it isn't just a marketing thing, it's that the product fits with their story of education, performance, and sustainability. We get to reinforce everything that's happening in our homes today, and your customers are responding. Another part of the story that you tell with biochar is that it's now we're moving away from the commodity conversations. So one of biochar's biggest advantages is how it changes the conversation. And instead of competing on just price, like traditional soil products, biochar will let landscapers and retailers talk about outcomes. You get to talk about better soil and better plants and happier customers. So I think that's powerful because it reframes soil from a commodity into a solution. And when customers understand that biochar keeps working, season after season, it justifies premium pricing and it builds some trust. So in competitive bids or crowded retail shelves, biochar stands out because it has a simple, credible story that's, in our opinion, it's easy to repeat. So shopper loyalty and sustainability is what we want to talk about in this slide. And this is where biochar really can shine long term. I mean, it's going to give the staff something meaningful to talk about, and it's not like although Tom was very technical, it's not a technical lecture. It's just like this short, honest explanation of long-term soil health and sustainability. Those, the quick aisle conversations with your staff and the customer will build trust. I think it builds loyalty. Excuse me. Especially when we're looking at, you've got a lot of eco-conscious homeowners coming in and companies. This is checking all the boxes. And that environmental benefit is real. Tom explained that, I think very, very well. So what happens is customers don't have to change how they garden or landscape. They're going to simply improve outcomes while doing something better for the planet. So the combination of performance and purpose is why biochar isn't a trend, it's a category builder.
So with that, I want to just thank everybody again for their time and really appreciate and can't wait to answer questions. And if you have additional questions later on, you can reach out to Jordan, go to our QR code. You could reach us in a lot of different ways. For one, just so you know, we are obviously very passionate about what Wakefield is doing and what we can do for you. And we're also just passionate about trying to educate and grow the biochar industry. So we just thank you again for your time.
All right, Steve, Tom, and Tony, we've got excuse me, quite a bit of questions to get to, and I had put a note in the chat to everyone that if we do run out of time, that you all will get a list of all the questions, and you will have the contact information for some of those folks who are asking questions, and you can respond to them privately if we are not able to get to all of them. But so I wanted to start off real quickly by asking Steve, can you please let the audience know where to buy products?
Oh, for sure. So all of the products that we talked about today are available through BFG Supply is often the place that's easiest to get them from. And the bulk product is also available through BFG. The super sacks can be delivered to any job site or nursery or store. You can also call us directly at Wakefield, where our headquarters are in Valdosta, Georgia. So often it's just a conversation of how much you want to buy, where your location is, and getting the best shipping option to get it to your store or your job site. But those two methods are usually the best place to start.
Excellent, thanks. Um, One of our attendees asks for existing orchards or gardens, what is the best application method?
So an existing orchard, if you're looking at like with trees and what we're trying to do with that, there are application methods where we can get into air spading and things that we can around the drip zone. But the best thing you can do is try to get the char around the drip zone of any sort of tree within an orchard. There's actually there's a lot of expertise in vineyards, and certainly can get into some detail with that. Where there's some groups on the West Coast that have been done some phenomenal work with biochar and vineyards and has shown a tremendous return on that investment. For existing gardens, a practical use is just again to top dress and try to get it in as much as you can into the soil to make sure it gets into the soil, and it'll eventually work its way down a little bit, but it's going to still do some very beneficial things.
I'll add to that with existing garden. I only say this because this is what I do with my garden. I'll typically put another layer of compost or other, something else on top, for each season, and I'll blend the biochar into that whatever I'm placing in the garden, so it's there, and that helps me get it in that top couple of inches right away.
Thanks. Another question, if I use pre-mixed potting soil made of peat, perlite, wood, and wood fiber, how much biochar can I add when planting perennials in containers?
That's a great question. I think again the rule of 5 to 10% is a wonderful rule if you can do that. What's interesting is that biochar itself actually is a good replacement for things like perlite. And with peat, there's studies that show you can kind of do a 1-for-1 on peat if you wanted to like a blend with that. So you could use a little bit less of your current mix that you have and add about 10% biochar and try to get it all integrated together, and they will work together nicely.
Great. Are you or others doing ongoing research and development of biochar? Or let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna leave that question at that because
Yeah. And I'll answer my part. And if Tony, if you have something to fill in, as far as research, one of the things that's extraordinary going on with biochar is that back in the 90s when I was doing my research, there really weren't a lot of universities doing it. Now there's literally thousands and thousands of research papers of people doing research on biochar for all sorts of purposes, with a lot of it being focused on soil health. So there is a lot of research out there, more than has ever been before, to show how to use biochar or prove or disprove certain things about biochar. And so there is information out there for people to get if they're interested on very specific topics. We do work with universities throughout the United States as well, providing them our biochar so they can do research, and then they do their own research and get their own conclusions from it.
Yeah, and I will add to that. There's also more than one very credible and well-established biochar organization in the country, whether it be the IBI, the USBI, and the USBC. So there is a structure and an obvious development of the biochar community to make sure we're looking at best practices, test procedures, and also creating awareness and education. So that is also a great sign of how the research and the experience of biochar is improving.
And Tom, we have a lot of questions around like feedstock and ash content, particle size, moisture. Can you maybe just give an overview of what our feedstock is, the particle size you can expect, moisture content, that kind of thing with Wakefield Biochar?
Sure. For us, we use waste woods. So it's southern yellow pine. Waste woods is the primary feedstock that we have, and really the predominant feedstock. So the products that you get from Wakefield are all coming from a waste material, a waste wood. So we're not out there cutting trees to make the biochar. We're taking waste materials from other production processes, and that's being converted into the char. The particle size generally is a range between a little bit of a fine particle to about 2 to 3 millimeters in particle size. And that range is just a natural thing that occurs during the pyrolysis process. So that's going to be your particle size range. And Steve, the other question was dealing with moisture.
Correct. Yeah, just about moisture content and also ash content or other.
Yeah, so that's great. So with a wood-based biochar, generally you're going to see an ash content around 20%. plus or minus, depending on maybe where you would get it. But for us, you're going to see that. And the other moisture content, it's an important part of questions dealing around biochar. If it's bone dry, if you were to get bone dry biochar, the first thing it would do when you put it in the soil is suck up water. And that can cause some very frustrated plants at the very beginning. Our biochar itself is generally around 50% moisture, but part of that purpose is so that when you integrate it into your soils, the first thing it does is not take away water. It's got water in it. And we also obviously try to incorporate it with other amendments that help support the biochar and what it's doing for your soil.
I want to kind of add to that as well. Because I'm on the marketing side, I'm gonna look at user experience. If you get bone dry biochar in a bag and you open it up, as a customer, the first thing you're going to have is a face full of biochar dust. It is going to be uncomfortable and not a great experience. So you do have to recognize that. We also know there are complaints about, well, that's a lot of water. It makes the bag heavier. Uh, we promise this is the way to go. You do not want bone dry biochar in your first application. The other is the particle size. So we have what we think is an appropriate and very utilitarian particle size. It has a significant amount of surface area to the soil. It still helps create the soil texture that you would want using biochar. There's very few applications where you would need either smaller or larger chunks. I can see a bonsai mix maybe with a larger chunk, and those are out there. There are chunky char options, and then we also have some powdery, more powdered biochar that might be great for hydro spraying in a different way or in a different format. But the bags that you see commonly from Wakefield that we think are the best or most appropriate particle size for all of the applications we've talked about.
Can it be used with cocoa peat or core? Sorry, easy for me to say. If yes, what ratio will it be used in soil? Yeah, if yes, what ratio?
So with like a coconut core, things like that, I mean, one of the things I would just do is you're going to have a recommended amount of that product that you want to put into your soil. We tend to really allow people to understand, like, we don't necessarily want to go against the recommendations of that manufacturer for that product, if that's what we're trying to do, but we still continue to recommend about a 5 to 10% by volume integration of biochar into that. So if anything, what I would do is I would subtract about the same volume of biochar you're doing from the mix and blend it in and then put that into your soil.
With clay soils, will the biochar run off the surface faster with horizontal movement caused by rain and irrigation than it would move down vertically?
So with clay soils, that's a great question because that's why when I kind of refer to maybe you want to try to get into that clay, break it up a little bit, get it down into it. Biochar can be susceptible to if you have a heavy rain, then that could cause a large runoff effect. That's going to take anything off the soil. Biochar will be just as susceptible to that as anything else. So you do want to try to find ways, whether if it is an established grass, that's great, it's going to help keep it there. But on a pure clay surface, you do want to find a way to integrate it into that.
Um, Someone would like to know, can you use more or less biochar depending on the soil type?
The answer to that is you can always do more or less. Some of it is a little bit of art versus science. I've got researchers from the University of Georgia that we work with that want to do 40 to 50% biochar just to see how it goes. Right? They're not causing detriment to the plants, but they're just curious what that really does. So depending on the soil types, I really do think if you're looking at sandy soils, I know personally because we do large scale land applications as well as the small scale work, you can do more than the 10%, and it's still going to be very beneficial to it. If you have very acidic soils and you're looking to raise the pH, you're not going to hurt it by adding more biochar to it. It's going to be helpful to it. It really can be something where you can balance it out. I know, I think I've talked to people in Iowa quite a bit, and Tony and I are from Missouri, but people in Iowa claim the best soil in the world, right? They've got a huge amount of wonderful soil up there. Well, when you're driving a Cadillac, what do you want to do to improve it? Well, you can still add the biochar, it's still going to improve it, right? So you may not have to add as much. You could probably add a little less and be okay.
Mhm.
I want to add to that too, because I think it's a great question about using less, and some of that goes to maybe your customer's budget, right? So you can add less. Let's say instead of 10%, you want to do about 2 or 3%. That's great. Come in the next season or the next year and add a little more, and it can build up and it can ultimately get to the full application rate, but you will see benefit from the lesser percent of by volume with biochar. It's just a matter of building up if that's the most appropriate answer for your customer.
All right, excellent. One of our attendees says that they have found putting biochar into the composting process from the very beginning gives them the best results. But do you think that putting raw biochar into the final growing area is better?
Oh, um, so when you put biochar into like a composting mix, you have your composter going and you're doing your backyard composting. It's wonderful because it's all about those microbes. It's increasing the microbes, increasing the ability for them to heat up and degrade the material that you're trying to compost. So, and it's also charging up. It's soaking up all those nutrients and stuff into the pores as it's in there. So that's a wonderful way to do it. It really is. If you don't have that option, or you just choose not to want to do that option, integrating it into the soil, especially if it's a pure biochar into the soil, is fine. But what we do let people know is it's still going to want to like charge up. It's still going to want to do some things in that soil. So you want to be aware that when you put pure biochar into your soil, it's like a battery. It's going to charge up and then it's going to release it all back. So just give it a week or so, to kind of let it do its thing, and I think you'll see a lot of good results from it.
And Tom, I think you sort of answered this, but there's a few questions that are along the lines of, is it possible to overuse biochar, or is there a situation where you would not want to use biochar?
Um, I, I don't know about not want to use biochar, but I think you can't overuse it because remember, it's not a nutritional source. And I think that's the one thing that would probably hurt somebody if they overuse biochar an excessive amount. You're not putting nutrients in your soil. And so you have to have a good nutrient management plan. So if you want to use a lot of biochar, there's part of me that's like, I'm all for it, but you need to understand that you're also preventing other things to be in that soil. And so you need to make sure you have nutrition for the plants, which is going to be incorporated in the biochar. Um, that would be an important thing to consider.
And so I think the guide there is the 5 to 10% volume mix that you had mentioned earlier. And I think the question might be if we're a little over that, if we're 15% or 20%, it's probably not going to have a big negative effect. It's more about maybe over
No,
50.
I'm thinking more like 60%,
Right,
50,
right.
getting up
Yeah.
there. You're going to overwhelm it. In as far as it's just going to become a char bed. Now, I will say this, we have piles of biochar that we've had on some farm fields we haven't spread yet, and they've been there for a couple months, and they're covered in plants, covered in grass, covered in growth. So you actually can grow things on it, but I just personally, I always like to try to tell people you do want to make sure you integrate it with your soils and your other materials, just so it's the best practice.
Good. And,
Yeah.
and related to that, oh, so go ahead, Tony.
I just so I have yeah, I think because my advice was really that uh, biochar is amazing. We love it, but it's not magical. It's not something you just put it in the soil, walk away, and come back, a couple of months, and everything's growing and it's perfect. You still have to be a gardener, or you have to take care of your lawn. You manage what you're doing, but biochar is going to make it a little bit easier, and it's going to help things grow. But recognizing you're still going to watch the moisture level of your garden. You're still going to check to whether or not there's enough nutrition, nutrients and fertilizer, whatever you would use, or organic content. That still is a part of your plan, but we know biochar makes it easier and more efficient use of those things.
Awesome. And I was going to follow up with, there's a few questions I think that are a good follow-up to this about how often do you need to apply biochar? You talked a little bit about how it stays in the soil for a long time, but I do think depending on what you're doing in your garden, there might be some ideas for like reapplying year after year or in your landscaping, but maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. And I've talked to landscapers and we've worked with landscapers for a number of years now. One of the things we look at, especially if you're top dressing, you're really not overdoing the application of biochar when you're top dressing at the recommended rates. So that can become an annual or even twice a year. You can apply in the spring and the fall and still be quite fine with top dressing. If you're going to be doing some tilling and getting it really into the soil, You just want to kind of understand, like, is that soil going to stay there? Is it a raised bed garden and it's not being removed? Are you replacing the soil? Those are the things to look at. But in general, when I talk to landscapers specifically and they're using it, let's say for a top dressing, it can be put into a program that they have with their current existing products and just maintain the same pace.
Yeah, and I'll add just because I like to add a little color to whatever Tom says. Depending on where you are in the country, there's that freeze and thaw that can allow some of the biochar to migrate in deeper, and that may be something you can watch where each year you can put a little more to top it off, basically.
Great. And another good question, someone was asking about how biochar could work in a fertilizer spreader or other spreaders.
So like a broadcast spreader, or is what I'm kind of thinking what people are talking about. For broadcast spreaders, the biochar itself, it's good to have one with a good agitator if it's going to be a pure biochar or biochar with carbon boost, just because when you're spreading into those, it'll go through the throat of the spreader just fine. And we have spread quite a bit with some broadcast spreaders. But if it's going to be like your small push behind, or then you really do want to make sure the agitator is working well, just to break up a potential bridging issue. But it will go through the spreader. Compost spreaders, litter spreaders, all those things work great. And if you're integrating it with a fertilizer, like a granule fertilizer, generally there's no issues with that at all. Like you can just spread it just the way you would normally spread it with those, because they're also flowing, and you're getting that flow that you need to spread the material on the ground.
Thank you. Another question we have is about particle size and the difference, if any, particle size might make in the kind of applications we're talking about today.
I think Tony hit on it earlier as far as in general, the particle sizes that we have, which is kind of a fine particle to like a 3 millimeter granule. Those are good as an all in, application thing. When you have some unique things, whether it's like bonsai trees and things where you may want to have a chunky char, and that's just through the expertise of that specific niche, then you would want to make sure you get that type of char. But all the things that we've talked about, and for us, just to kind of give you some scale, whether it's a cubic foot bag going to a raised bed garden, or we've put, tens of thousands of tons on farmland, it's all the same size particle.
There was, I've got to find it. There was a, question about how it differs from humic products. Can you talk a little bit about how it compares to compost or other or humic products?
In general, we've added humic acid to the biochar and the blends in order to help augment. Again, we don't see them as competitive. We see them as additive. And so some of the times we'll add a humic acid because you want to raise the pH to get it to somewhere where you want it to be around, 6.5, 6.6 or something like that. Or you're adding it to help integrate with your mycorrhizal fungi or other things that you have in the blend. So we tend to not want to say there's a competition between the two. You would use them both. Again, it's not a compost. It doesn't degrade. Those things tend to go away. So the biochar is more stable than those products.
How soon after adding biochar might one need to fertilize again in a landscape planting?
I would follow the regular fertilization patterns that you normally do. It's not something that you need to do something more frequently. Just maintain your current practices for fertilization. If anything, once you feel comfortable with biochar, and I would say you should feel comfortable with biochar, you could add a little less fertilizer than you would normally do, and I think you'll still see the same results.
Someone asks, knowing that hyper amending landscape plants, trees especially, creates a pitting effect, can we expect biochar amended soils to create less of that interface?
I would probably have to take that offline. I need to think about that one. That's a
Yeah.
very technical question that I'd like to have a second to think about before
Sure,
I try to
sure.
answer
Yeah,
that.
because I'm thinking is referring to like compost will decompose and it creates gaps or spaces. I mean, I was just going to suggest that the biochar structure, the material itself, will not decompose, and it's a very solid structure in a way. So that's not going to create a pitting. But the other things that are in the soil may do that for you, but biochar would not contribute to that. Because, what do you think, Tom? You're more
Yeah.
technical.
No, I think that's great. I don't want to. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the first time I've had that question, so I didn't want to just go off the cuff and say anything.
Sure. That's great. It's
Yeah.
good, thoughtful question and thoughtful answer as well. Um, does biochar help in weed control in vegetable gardens?
So the biochar, by creating stronger roots in the vegetable garden, you're suppressing the ability for weeds to grow. So the answer is yes, it will help suppress weed growth. Are weeds going to grow? Very likely you can still have weeds. We can't say you're not going to have weeds, but by having stronger, healthier plants, and depending on how you spaced them and planted them out in the soil health, weeds like to go in stressed environments. They like to grow in areas where there's weakness, right? And so they're going to grow there. There's going to be less opportunity for that in a biochar minute soil.
Yeah, I wish biochar,
Yeah.
got rid of all weeds. That would be lovely. I don't think that's not the case, but it does help.
Our area tends to have alkaline soils. Do you have a recommendation on lowering pH with a higher pH ingredient like biochar?
Yeah. I mean, there are products out there, sulfur, humic acids, things like that. That's why we put humic acid in some of our blends. So I would look at those other ingredients. The other thing you can do if you have a desire, like biochar's pH is going to range between 7.5, 8, maybe a little bit higher than 8 in general. If you want a little hack and how to do something, if you're really interested in lowering the pH but just using biochar, wash it with a lot of water. That gets rid of the ash. The pH is coming from the mineral, the ash content. By washing it with water before you put it in your soil, or actually getting rid of that, you're lowering the pH down to 7.
We've got about 3 minutes left and just wanted to remind everyone we have a lot of questions. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience and asking so many questions. But if we don't get to yours, your question will be answered eventually, and our presenters will have everyone's questions and we'll be able to get to those. Do synthetic or salt fertilizers inhibit the effectiveness of biochar?
They'll still absorb those fertilizers and charge up with them and then release that back into the soil. If not, and the fertilizers will work the way that they are intended to work.
Okay. I had a couple come into the chat. Let me look at there real quick. Our water is more basic than our native plants like. Will biochar increase the pH even further?
In general, we really don't see a huge impact on pH with biochar. And any slight impact on the pH is going to go away because that's from, again, like I just said, the mineral content or the ash content. That is not the permanence. The permanence comes from the carbon, and that's what's going to stay there. So I would say that's how I would look at it. And the alkalinity of your water, that's an interesting problem to have. So.
And Tom, one of the other questions we got is about is the biochar OMRI listed? You want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I was going to tell you to talk about it, Steve.
Well, I can talk about it. The biochar is OMRI listed, as well as the biochar with Carbon Boost. Those two products are. The other blends, because we're mixing with other ingredients, we haven't had those specifically OMRI listed, but all of the ingredients are organic or organic certified. And you can read about that on the packaging. And then maybe one last question here, and I know I can see that there are others coming in. Thank you. And like Kelly said, we will absolutely get to everybody's questions. So just email us or contact us. We're happy to talk about that. But a good question is, how is Wakefield Biochar different from other kinds of biochars? Maybe talking about, just our sources and our processes and a little bit about our quality might be good.
And I don't want to, I know we have like less than 30 seconds. So as far as our biochar is concerned, we focus on quality control and consistency. Other biochars don't have that. We have a very consistent feedstock that is treated the same way in order to make the char in the same particle size. We have quality managers on site. We try to make sure everything that we provide you is consistent and what we're trying to put on the package is what you're getting. And I don't think that's always the case for smaller biochar producers that don't have that capability.
And just in case some of our attendees were not able to see that QR code or that contact information at the bottom of the screen, it is there in full view. So be sure and point your phone cameras to that, and you'll be able to contact some Wakefield folks through that. Again, thank you everyone for joining us, and watch for an email from GIE Media in a few days with the link to this presentation. Again, thank you, Wakefield, for your expertise and your time today. And everybody have a great day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.